Have you ever noticed how quiet starts to feel more like peace and less like loneliness as you get older? Have you felt that slow but certain shift where the desire to be surrounded by people gives way to something simpler, softer, and more fulfilling? It can be unsettling at first, especially in a world that keeps telling us we need to be constantly connected. But here's a truth no one wants to say out loud: after 70, you don't need friends the way you used to. And not only is that okay, it might just be the most freeing realization of your entire life. Let's be honest, people change. Relationships change. And over time, what once felt like deep, rooted friendships begin to feel more like distant memories, or worse, responsibilities. You call, they don't call back. You try to keep the rhythm alive, but the melody is gone. Eventually, you're left wondering whether it's still worth the effort. And somewhere in that wondering, something shifts. The weight lifts. You start to breathe easier. And you realize maybe you don't need them anymore. Today, we're going to talk about 6 powerful reasons why life after 70 doesn't require the friendships it once did. We're not talking about isolation. We're not talking about bitterness. We're talking about clarity and the bold decision to stop chasing what no longer nourishes you. Each reason will gently pull back the curtain on a truth you may already feel in your bones but haven't yet said aloud. So let's begin. Number 1, you've already done the work of belonging. There's a certain kind of hunger that lives in us when we're young. A hunger to be seen, to be invited, to matter. So we build friendships like scaffolding, tying ourselves to others in hopes that we'll stand taller. And for a time, that scaffolding serves us. It holds us up through heartbreaks, careers, marriages, child-rearing, and everything in between. But what happens when the structure is already built? What happens when you are already standing strong on your own? That's what happens after 70. You've already done the work of belonging, to a family, to a community, to yourself. You no longer need external proof of your worth. You've lived too much life, seen too many things, survived too many storms to still be questioning whether you matter. You know you do. And that knowing begins to take the place of the old friendships that once filled in those gaps. Take Helen, 76, who once hosted neighborhood dinner parties like clockwork. Every Friday night, wine, laughter, dishes in the sink until midnight. She loved it. But over time, the faces changed. People moved, some passed on, and others simply drifted. At first, she tried to keep the gatherings alive, new people, same ritual. But the sparkle was gone. It started to feel like performance. She wasn't hosting because she wanted to, she was hosting because she didn't know how to stop. Until one night, she did. She lit a candle, made her favorite pasta, and watched the sunset alone from her porch. That quiet moment felt more like belonging than the crowded tables ever did. There comes a time when friendship stops being about connection and starts being about maintenance. And if it's more work than warmth, maybe it's time to let go. Number 2, your peace has become sacred. In your 70s, peace stops being a luxury and becomes a necessity. Your nervous system just doesn't have the appetite for noise, tension, or unnecessary energy. Conversations that used to energize now exhaust. Group dynamics that once entertained now feel chaotic. And perhaps the most sacred realization of all, you no longer owe anyone your presence. Friendships, even good ones, come with expectations. Return the call. Attend the lunch. Remember the birthday. Be available. But what happens when you just want to be still? When your soul wants to move slower, softer, without explanation? That's the kind of peace that doesn't fit inside a group text or a crowded dinner table. Martin, 79, knew this all too well. He'd been part of a weekly poker group for nearly a decade. Same guys, same jokes, same whiskey. It was fun. Until it wasn't. One day, he found himself dreading Friday nights. Not because anyone had done anything wrong, but because he had changed. The noise was too loud. The conversations too shallow. He didn't want to talk about stocks or politics. He wanted to sit in his garden and listen to birds. So he stopped going. No big speech, no dramatic exit. Just a quiet goodbye. And in that silence, something bloomed: space. Spaciousness to hear himself think, to read without interruption, to nap in the late afternoon sun without guilt. Peace isn't about shutting the world out. It's about inviting yourself in. And if friendships are disrupting that peace more than enriching it, it's okay, even necessary, to choose yourself. Number 3, you've outgrown the performance of friendship. There's a strange performance that creeps into friendships as we age. The polite updates. The careful omissions. The repeated stories you've told 100 times because it's what they expect to hear. It can start to feel less like connection and more like acting out a familiar role, one you've long since outgrown. You laugh at the same jokes, ask the same questions, nod at the same answers. But behind it all, you're thinking about what you really want to say, about the dreams that never happened, the fears that are creeping in, the grief that still lives under your skin. But those aren't things you can bring up at brunch. So you smile. You pretend. You perform. And when it's over, you feel lonelier than before. That's not friendship. That's routine. And routine, without depth, starts to wear thin after a while. Eleanor, 82, found herself there. Every Sunday, she met with 2 old friends for tea. It was their tradition. For years, they talked about books, news, family. But lately, she felt like a ghost in her own life, nodding through their chatter, thinking about things she could never say out loud. About how much she missed her late husband. About how scared she was of the future. About how sometimes, when the house was too quiet, she cried for no reason. But whenever she tried to open up, the conversation shifted back to small talk. She stopped going. And for the first time in years, she started journaling instead. Writing to herself. Talking to herself. Listening to herself. It was lonely at first. Then it was honest. Then it was healing. There's no shame in realizing a friendship has run its course. Sometimes, letting go of what's familiar is the only way to make room for what's real, even if what's real is solitude. Because solitude can be the most honest company there is. Now let's keep going. The last 3 reasons are even more important than the first. Number 4, disappointment becomes heavier than the relationship is worth. There's a deep, dull ache that comes from being let down by someone you once trusted. A friend who no longer calls. A conversation that never goes beyond "how are you?" A birthday forgotten. A visit promised but never made. And after 70, those disappointments don't just hurt, they start to feel unbearable. Because you've been through enough. You've buried enough people, lost enough time, and seen enough of life to know that your emotional energy is precious. You can't afford to waste it on relationships that don't show up for you. At this age, every connection carries weight. And when that connection lets you down, the betrayal cuts deeper, not because the offense is greater, but because your tolerance is lower. You've given too much of yourself for too long to people who couldn't hold it. And now, you simply can't keep pretending it doesn't matter. Take Rose, 75. Her oldest friend of 40 years, once like a sister to her, had slowly started fading. Calls returned days later. Conversations always rushed. Always busy. And one day, when Rose was in the hospital for a minor procedure, she waited, hoping for a visit, even a phone call. Nothing. A week passed. Then 2. When her friend finally reached out, it was casual, as if nothing had happened. That was the moment Rose realized something had shifted. Not just in the friendship, but in herself. She no longer had room in her life for people who couldn't be present. She didn't say anything dramatic. She just didn't answer the next time the phone rang. Some might call that bitter. But it wasn't. It was clear. After a certain age, clarity becomes your closest ally. And one of the clearest realizations you can have is this: some relationships no longer deserve a seat at your table. Especially when you've finally learned how to sit there peacefully alone. Number 5, the best company might just be you. This may sound radical, even sad, but stay with me, because it's not. The truth is, one of the greatest joys of life after 70 is discovering that your own company is enough. That you are enough. After decades of being there for everyone else, children, partners, co-workers, friends, you finally turn inward and meet the most important person of all, yourself. And sometimes, that self is a stranger at first. There's a story of a man named Arthur, 81. Widowed, retired, and living alone. For the first year after his wife passed, he tried to stay busy. He joined social clubs, took up bridge, even started volunteering, anything to avoid the silence. But no matter how many people he surrounded himself with, something was missing. Then one day, he stopped. He sat in his kitchen with a cup of coffee and didn't reach for the phone. He didn't turn on the television. He just sat. And slowly, he began to enjoy it. He started noticing things, the way the morning light hit the countertop, the quiet creak of the floorboards, the rhythm of his own breath. That stillness became his sanctuary. He began talking to himself, out loud sometimes, writing letters to his younger self, taking himself out for lunch. Not because he was lonely, but because he finally understood that he'd never really taken time to know himself. And to his surprise, he discovered he liked who he was. Friendship with oneself isn't a consolation prize. It's a full, rich, complicated relationship. One that requires attention, grace, and patience. And unlike so many others, it never walks away. Number 6, you've learned that less truly is more. In youth, we collect friends, experiences, memories, belongings. We fill our calendars and our homes and our hearts. But as the years go by, we begin to let go. Not because we're giving up, but because we're making space. And after 70, you learn the quiet joy of less. Fewer calls to make. Fewer birthdays to remember. Fewer misunderstandings to unravel. Less noise. Less drama. Less pretending. What remains is something clearer, softer, and deeply sacred: your time. Your energy. Your voice. And that doesn't mean you push everyone away. It means you choose. Carefully. Intentionally. Maybe it's just one neighbor you still enjoy talking to. Maybe it's your daughter, or a cousin, or an old friend who never made you feel like you had to perform. That's enough. You don't need a dozen voices around you to feel whole. Frank, 78, put it perfectly. I used to think that being alone meant I'd failed at staying connected. Now I see it as proof that I've finally stopped chasing what doesn't feed me. What matters most now isn't how many friends you have. It's how deeply you live in your own truth. And if that truth is quiet, if it walks alone through the woods or gardens in the late afternoon, if it naps without apology or reads for hours without interruption, then maybe you've finally arrived at the best part of life. Where nothing needs to be added. Nothing needs to be explained. Where you are the company you've been waiting for all along. Conclusion: letting go of the noise, embracing the light. If you've made it this far, then maybe you've already felt the stirring in your own life, the friendships that faded, the conversations that tired you out, the longing not for people, but for peace. And maybe you've questioned yourself, wondered if something's wrong. Wondered if you're becoming too isolated, too withdrawn. But let me tell you, maybe what's happening isn't withdrawal. Maybe it's arrival. You're not pulling away from others. You're coming home to yourself. After decades of pouring out love, energy, effort, you're finally offering it inward. That's not loneliness. That's wisdom. That's power. That's freedom. So if the phone rings less, if the invites slow down, if the table is set for one, don't grieve it. Welcome it. Light a candle anyway. Pour the tea. Speak out loud if you want to. Or just sit in the silence. Because this is the golden part of life. Where everything extra falls away, and all that's left is the truth of who you are. And that is more than enough. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for listening, for reflecting, for letting your heart stay open. If this message spoke to something deep in you, please know you are not alone. Not in your quiet. Not in your clarity. Not in your choice to live these years on your own terms. Take good care of yourself. You've earned that. You deserve that. And I'll see you in the next video.